So thanks, Ali, Paul, Sean, for joining today's session. In the Metaverse Blockathon, a lot of what we've been focused on is the applications in the Metaverse, and then Blockathon as a public good initiative educates for how to build those applications for the Metaverse and how to gain skills, work towards earning bounties, and work towards the final competition, which will be on the 8th of June. And something that is very interesting is that besides the applications themselves and the beautiful images that are rendered, and then we see 3D immersive digital experiences, there is also vast amounts of data that applications, decentralized applications, need to consume in an efficient way. And SubQuery, which is the main workshop for today, presented by Sean, is basically providing the entire substrate ecosystem with efficient data querying. That by that, basically applications are able to feed the data effectively for users to have requests instead of having to query the blockchain directly. And Sean will give us the walkthrough for all of the things that have been built and what are the things that are capable with all these technologies. And essentially, as a core pillar of infrastructure for what the Metaverse will be built upon, data query protocols are super, super important. So I'm really stoked to have Sean present, and the SubQuery team is a team I know for quite a while and are really like solid, one of the leading builder teams in the substrate ecosystem. So that's quite a privilege to have you guys involved in Blockathon DAO and contributing to the Metaverse Blockathon. So without further ado, Sean, over to you.
Awesome, thank you so much, Daniel. I'm just going to share my screen. If you could allow me to share.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. You can try now.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Here we go. Awesome, thank you. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the SubQuery presentation, where we'll be talking a little bit about what SubQuery is, how it works, and how we're trying to make the world's decentralized data a lot more accessible. So what I'll do is I'll go through a bit of an agenda, and then I understand that we've got, I think, Ali on the line as well. So we'll see if we'll get everyone to introduce themselves. It is a small group, because this workshop is going to be hands-on, right? We'll talk about some of the concepts, but the key really is to get building on this with the SubQuery SDK to really understand what it is and how powerful it can be. So instead of listening to me talk for 45 minutes, I'll be talking for just a bit, and then we'll go in and actually see how it works. So on the agenda, I'll go through a basic introduction, and then we'll talk about some of the basic concepts. We've got three main areas that we want to really understand when trying to build a SubQuery project. Then we'll jump straight in and actually build one. I'll show you how easy and quick it is, and then everyone here can follow along as well. We'll take a quick look at what SubQuery project is. It's a capital P, and this is really what we call the hosted version or the centralized version. And then we'll finish off with a summary and a Q&A at the end as well. However, having said that, if you do have any questions throughout the actual workshop, please feel free to ask by the chat, open your mic and ask as well, because we do have quite a small group, so let's keep it relaxed and informal as well. So, by way of introduction, as mentioned, my name is Sean. I've been a trainer for several years now, over 10 years. I started out training in Atlassian and then moved into some blockchain training, and then also with Consensus training in Asia Pacific. Various large enterprises such as LG, Procter & Gamble, Union Bank in the Philippines, and Bank South Pacific, etc. Looking around, I wonder if Ali, are you around? Would you be interested to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm around. Actually, I'm Ali. architecture and urban planning. Right now I'm working with a project inside the Blockathon DAO. It's called Adiland. They are trying to have this immersive experience, like a cultural themed experience. And I'm actually really interested in SubQuery right now because it seems interesting. So I'm here for this, and you have my full attention.
Oh, welcome. And what time zone are you in, by the way, or what country?
BST. I'm in Tunisia, okay? So we are on the British summertime. So actually it's 11 a.m. right now.
Oh, excellent.
Cool.
From Tunisia. Welcome.
Yeah.
Ya hala, ya hala.
أهلا وسهلا.
Daniel, how many languages do you know? I swear you know like one word from every single language on the planet.
In Arabic, I know a few more words.
I see.
What?
Excellent.
The best خويا.
Ça va, خويا.
We also have Reynold, Sean, by the way. Someone else has joined.
Yeah, so Reynolds. Looks like we're in his kitchen here.
Renaud, you can introduce yourself quickly.
You can unmute yourself if you want.
How you going? So it's Reynolds here and Joe. We're actually staying with Daniel at his Airbnb at his dragon fruit farm. It's beautiful here in Queensland. We're very appreciative of him. But most of all, we love, he's like the Balaji S. Naval of the
TMI.
So we love him. And this is, I'm at McKinsey and I want to go on a blockchain and I love this shit and we're going to go scale this shit up and I love it so much. And this is Joe, my beautiful girlfriend.
Hi guys, really awesome to be a part of this. I hadn't heard it about Blockathon until very recently, so this is my first introduction. So yeah, thanks guys for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I assume you guys all know each other as well, Daniel and Paul, so probably no need to introduce yourselves here. So let's get into it, because we do have 60 minutes or 50 minutes by now. So let's jump into the introduction here, where the problem we're trying to solve is that trying to get data from the blockchain is actually a lot harder than you think. I mean, you can do it, no big deal, but there are some problems, particularly in Polkadot, right? Query speed is a challenge in any type of blockchain because it's traditionally quite slow. I mean, a relational standard database is fast, it's built for that, but if you're trying to use a blockchain for a database, you probably don't want to. And in particular, trying to synchronize or index a blockchain and make a copy of it can take days to actually go ahead and do that operation. Also, in particular, you may know about this multi-chain universe people talk about, because we've got the Bitcoin blockchain, we've got Ethereum, a whole bunch of other chains, because back in the days, in the early 2010s, etc., when people said the word blockchain, it was always the Bitcoin blockchain. But now, you've actually got to preface it with, well, what blockchain are you talking about, right? Is it the Binance blockchain, for example? So the diversity in the blockchain makes it even more challenging, because if you want to grab data across different blockchains, that's even harder. And in particular with Polkadot, their architecture is in such a way that you can have these so-called parachains. So parachains, if you haven't come across those, are mini blockchains that make use of some core common components from Polkadot, but then you can go ahead and create your own chain where you have to auction and try to lease these chains. But effectively what you're doing is trying to get data across different chains, and what SubQuery does is it tries to solve this problem by making it a lot easier, faster, cheaper, and quicker. Right. So SubQuery, the standard definition here is that it's an open source project that allows developers, such as yourselves, to do three main things. Right. The first one is to index the data, And that's the standard indexing that you may be familiar with in a database environment. Next up is to transform the data or the information itself. So you want to massage it, you want to get it into the right format, and then finally you want to go and access the data by querying this information in order to power, say, your Web3 mobile application. So some people like to think of it as a Google blockchain, as an analogy, but we're effectively trying to grab the data very quickly and easily from any kind of blockchain that you want, but in particular, the blockchains in the Polkadot ecosystem initially. So SubQuery allows you to do this by providing what's called the SubQuery SDK, the open source SDK, where you can create your own project. And we'll go ahead and do this very shortly. We've got SubQuery Projects itself, capital P here, where it's the hosted centralized version. And then you can use the SubQuery Explorer to search for projects that are already grabbing and indexing this blockchain data that you can go ahead and use, you can query, you can access via an API call. So we'll go over some of the basic concepts first, where SubQuery is like a set of instructions on how to index the data. And it's got, again, three main components that you really want to be familiar with. You can probably tell there's a pattern here where everything is done in threes, because as you know, it's easy to remember. And the first one is something called a manifest file. This file you can think of as a configuration file of your project. The second file is what we call the GraphQL Schema file. It allows you to define the shape of your data. When I first heard of this, I really couldn't understand what does the shape of your data mean. But again, when I show you what it actually looks like, you'll be able to understand a lot better. And then finally, the mappings file. And this is where all your programming or your JavaScript goes, because it allows you to transform your data. And we like to call it a technical term, all geeks love technical jargon, a data transformation pipeline. It just sounds cool, but effectively, you're trying to massage the information. So remember these three things, and I'll be showing you exactly what they look like very shortly. Now, something to note is that there are three mapping types. And again, this will be a lot more clearer when we look at an example, but we've got these things called a block handler, event handler, and call handler. So what we do is, imagine we've got the blockchain down here, a Polkadot blockchain, right? It could be mainnet, or it could be Kusama, which is the testnet of Polkadot. We don't want to go to every single block to query for information, right? Because we want to specify what we want, and if it's not in this block, we don't want to touch it. If it's in here, we'll go in and grab that data, but then we skip this block as well, just to make it a lot faster. Right? There's no point going into every single block. So what we do is we have filters. So a block handler inspects each and every block. So yes, we can use that, but generally we don't want to. We want to call event handlers, because we can place a filter on this, and every time there's an event that we are interested in, we can grab that data. So down here, we can grab the balance of the deposits of a particular address. We're down here, we can grab the balance deposit again. And then with a call handler, again, we can filter, be very specific about the information we want. Here, we're calling a timestamp. So hopefully this graphic here shows you the core principle that to grab data from the blockchain, A, you want to know what you want, and B, using SubQuery, you can grab exactly what you need very quickly and efficiently.
So if I may interject. So
Yes.
am I understanding correctly that you don't need to apply all handlers types for your queries? You can basically define which handlers are you going to deploy in your whichever query scripts that you're going to use?
Exactly. And in the example, in the Hello World example, what I do is I download a template project which has an example of each of these events, and then we just delete 2 of them and just focus on 1, for example, just to really make it a really simple project.
Very elegant.
So remember, I said there were 3 files that were really important to understand. The first one was the manifest file, and again, complicated name, but if you think of it as a configuration file, it makes it a bit easier to understand, right? Because in every kind of networking, computer, technical setup, you always have this config file, and it's very useful. It defines the detail of how SubQuery will index and transform the data. So it tells you what network it's pointing to, right? So Polkadot, whether it's using what we call a dictionary. I'll talk a bit more about that later. The dictionary effectively allows you to speed up processing the information, like a cache. And down below, we've got the handlers and we've got the filters. So what information do we want? We want to extract balance deposit only, to timestamp only, right? So that's your config file. Next, remember I mentioned a GraphQL Schema file that defines the shape of your data. Basically, it's a file with a whole bunch of variables. That's effectively what it is. You can see here we've got ID, amount, to and from, for example. So the way to think about this is the information you want to grab from the blockchain via an API call, and then have your front-end mobile application display this data, right? It's because this is your object. You've got a transfer object, or what we call an entity, and the variables that you define will power the front-end application. And then the third and final piece of the puzzle is what we call the mappings file. And this is really the meat and the bones, right, of your project, because it defines how you want to transform the data you get from the blockchain into the information the front end needs. And here you can see we're importing various requirements, files, objects, and then we've got JavaScript here of various functions to perform certain action that you want. So ensure account, handle transform, etc. And this is where you apply your programming skills. Okay, any questions you may have, just feel free to jump in.
Maybe the mappings, I mean, the manifest as config files is very straightforward analogy, and I think that it's really, it's clear. And then after that, the variables file also.
Yeah.
And then with regard to the shaping and mapping there, this is probably the things that is already like a bit more blockchain specific, so to say.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming that this is where like the major differences between parachains data would lie, like, because everything else is kind of like general programming, and here it's already like getting into the specifics of what the blockchain parameters or like functionality is. Is that kind of
Exactly. So for example, here you can see that we're going into this block.block.header.number.toNumber, right? So this is how you traverse the API in order to grab block information. In this case, it's a block number. So you're going to be familiar with the actual chain that you're dealing with.
Yeah, so this is already like super specific, and the rest are kind of like general, like pipeline and mapping, and then all the like pipeline for how just the software will like engage in function call or something like that.
Exactly.
I have one question. So the first time this particular script for a front end is executed, it queries the data, it maps it as according to whatever front end needs you have. Is it the case that after the first time a script is executed, the next time it's executed is more efficient, or is it just executed in the same way?
Yeah, okay, so these three files here really grab the data and it puts it into a database, a Postgres database.
Yeah.
And it makes it available to the front end via an API.
Right.
So it's already in a database, and then the front end web application will just query for the data from the API.
Yeah, that makes total
It's
sense.
already indexed. It's like a standard web to application actually.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. Just to save the time of doing the same thing over and over again, you know? Makes sense.
Exactly. And one of the powerful parts really is the filter concept, because again, we're dealing with a lot of information. So the more you can filter and describe or know exactly what you need, the better it is, the more efficient and the faster it will be for your query and your application in general. But again, this is all very abstract. So when we jump into an actual example, you actually see how it works. We also allow for custom chains as well. So, SubQuery can work with any substrate-based chain. You just import the custom type, or again, it's another configuration file, into your project YAML file, and then you adjust the mapping functions. So I can show you this. Well, actually, there was an example earlier on. See this endpoint here. We go to the Polkadot endpoint. You can go to Kusama. You can go any type of chain you want, and I'll show you in the actual example where you can import this as well. But that's enough of me talking, because the power really is in seeing how this works. So if you have VS Code open, feel free to open this up. And what I'll do is I'm actually going to follow a set of instructions here where this is our website, subquery.network. And if I go to build, let's go to courses. And on the left hand side, we've got this academy here, and we've got this heroes course. So if I click on this, let me scroll down to module 1, getting started. So there's this Hello World PDF workbook. So if you click on this, let me paste this into the chat just for the record. There we go. And you can download this PDF workbook, because I'll be going through this, where you'll need Node installed. So if you don't have that, just type, if you're running brew install Node.
Brew is for terminal in Mac, basically, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. So if you've got brew, if you're using brew, otherwise you can download Node by going to the website, for example. If you're not sure if you've got Node, just run node-v, and it should return a version. Otherwise, if it doesn't, then you know you don't have it and you need to install it.
Sorry, those commands are on the PDF? No, right?
I'm sorry?
To install Node?
Yeah, you can go
commands
to
are on the PDF as well, and yeah.
Yes, the PDF and the website's the same. Are you okay there, Ali?
No.
Got it. Okay. Well, Node is just a basic requirement for many applications actually. So you'll need to have Node running on your local laptop. Are you running Windows or Mac?
I'm running Windows, but
Got it.
how can I say this? I've never coded before, so this is actually so new.
Got it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm more
no worries.
interested in the utilities of SubQuery for
Yeah.
other projects. Okay.
Got it. No worries. So again, let me just, the whole idea of this workshop really is to show you how easy and quick it is to get up and running once you've got the requirements sorted, right? So if I go node I've got version 18, so you just install that. And then the next one is you want to run this command here, npm install subquery CLI, right? So that is what really allows you to run the subquery project. So if I go, I've obviously got it ahead of time. I'm running version 1.0. And then you do need Docker, so again, if you don't have this already set up, don't worry, just watch me. But once you've got these three things set up, it's actually really quick to go and test out a project. Because the first thing you do is you go SubQL init, right? And then it takes you through a series of steps. So let me go ahead and go project name. I'll go hackathon. Oops. I'll go hackathon link. So I can choose Avalanche, Substrate, Terra, and this list will constantly add to. I'll select Substrate, and I go to, let's say, Polkadot. This is the network. I choose SubQuery Starter. And again, I'm just choosing what's on a menu, right? The endpoint is the default one. I'll accept that. I'll accept the default Git repository. The author, let's just go Sean, and I'll just leave the description as is, the version, the license. So I'm just hitting enter, 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 and my demo project is ready, right? So what's actually happened? Well, on the right-hand side, you should see a whole bunch of files being created. So this is done just to save you time, and it's the framework or the scaffolding, so to speak. Now, remember I told you there are three important files. The first one is the schema file, right? This is how you describe your data. And the default project has field 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's just examples. You could rename these, you can change it to whatever you want. Let me just leave this as is for now. So all I've done is type the command subql init, hit enter about 5 times, and that's it. I'm going to leave this, the shape of my data, the schema file, the same. The project YAML file, remember this? This is the configuration file. And again, I'm not going to touch this at all, right? Well, I might actually comment this out actually. I have to comment this out because it's not required. We're fixing that at the moment. But again, we've got configurations pointing to chain ID, to an endpoint. We've got the filter we talked about. So I'm not going to go into detail about this. I just want to show you how this works and the end result. So I'm not going to touch this as well. And if I go into, on the left-hand side, source, mappings, and mapping handler, remember this is where a lot of the magic happens. The code we saw, we want to grab the block number, we want to grab the account, so how much, what account it went to, so this is the Polkadot receiving address. We want to grab the balance, right, so how much that account holds in DOT. And this is all by default, just as an example. And again, I'm not going to touch this. Now, what I need to do is run basically about 4 commands. The first one is, let's cd into my project folder called hackathon demo, and I run what's called yarn install. This is a standard command that all projects use, basically to download the dependencies the project requires. This will take about 40 to 50 seconds, and what you'll see is a new folder appear called Node Modules. So again, while this is working, let me just go back here. We ran SubQL init, and this is what happened. This is a mapping file, this is the configuration file, and here the shape of our data is slightly changed because we've deleted fields 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've just kept field 1 and renamed it to block height. So you can do whatever you want. I've just kept everything as default. And then you saw me run yarn install. The other code we're going to run is what we call yarn code gen, yarn build. And I'll explain what they do in a second. But here you can see we've got 46 seconds just to download all the dependencies. And I've got a new folder here called Node Modules. Again, you don't need to know about this. It's just magic under the covers that makes the project work. While I'm waiting, I'm just going to run Docker in the background because that'll take about 15-20 seconds to start up. But then I'm going to run code gen. And this is just a keyword you have to know. It took less than a second. And what this does is it takes your schema file, this one here, and it auto-generates the required code to populate it. And this is the secret, right? It's all automated for you. You don't have to do any coding here. You just define the fields that you need, and then all the coding. So for example, if I show you types, right? This types folder was not here at the beginning. When I ran yarn code gen, this appeared, and the TypeScript, this is all auto-generated. You can see here, auto-generated, do not edit, right? So that's the second command you want to run. And then the third and final command is to build the project. So here we've got yarn build. So all I'm going to do is just run yarn build, like so. And now I'm ready to start the project in my Docker environment. And then once we do that, I'm going to query the project and see what data comes from the blockchain, from the Polkadot blockchain. This is really exciting, guys. It's really exciting. So the command to run is, if I go into, again, the documentation, you can see here it's called Docker pull and Docker compose up. So let's split this and let's run Docker compose first. Pull. This is basically going to pull 3 images. We've got the GraphQL engine, we've got the Postgres image, and then we've got the SubQuery node. So what this does is it just makes it really easy to start your project in this Dockerized container. Now we go Docker compose up. So we're saying let's start the project, and let's take a look at the logs. And depending on the speed of your laptop, your computer, it may take maybe 20-30 seconds. Normally you'd run this on a high-powered server, and it's going to kick in the database here, Postgres database. The node should start. Here we go. Listening on port 80. Here we go. Look at this. Localhost 3000 is where we want to go. Right. So I'm going to jump to my browser. There we go. And down here below, you can see it's already fetching blocks, 1 to 100. So we're batching the query, going to Polkadot, getting 1 block, 100 blocks at a time from the Genesis block. So we're indexing from 0 here. And if I actually kept this running, it might take maybe 2 days to fully index the Polkadot blockchain. Right? It does take a long time. But the secret is, here we go, 19 days at the moment, right? So I'm not going to wait that long, but it'll decrease to like a couple of days. But
so generally speaking, if I were to actually do it for a project I'm interested in, like to index, I would properly indexed just after that time, after the block it was deployed, right? Like,
Yeah,
I would not have to index that directly. That's the
Correct.
whole thing about querying specific data, right? Or creating those queries.
yeah, and you can see
subgraphs.
correct, and you can see then the configuration file. We've got the start block, so I could make this 7 million, for example, and just start from there, right? So let's go to localhost, not 8,000 but 3,000, and then we've got this thing called a playground where you can test your project and see if it's working. So I've actually got this. I've done this ahead of time, so this won't work, right? Because it doesn't know what block height is. Well, excuse me. What I've got to do is put in field 1, because I didn't rename field 1 to block height. I just called it field 1. I left everything by default. So let's go back here and go field 1. And the autocomplete is actually really useful because you can see all the values that you can pick. So let's go run, and there we go. So this is actually coming out from Polkadot blockchain. I've just got the first 2, right? So if I go delete that, and let's go descending, it's giving me the 1,406th blockchain is synchronized to. And if I hit run again, 1,600, right? Give it a few more seconds. But you can really see this is actually live data, 1,700. And I could go to a Polkadot Explorer, and this is back in the early days, so there's probably not many transfers occurring. But I could go to a Polkadot Explorer and cross-check this data, and they would match exactly. Right. So, I mean, what happens now is that you take this query and you go and use it or put it into your front-end application, and then this data will be returned, and then you can show it in your UI of your mobile app or whatever you want. Really fast, really quick, and that's really the hello world, the 5-minute hello world. It took me longer than 5 minutes because I was trying to explain as I went, but I effectively ran maybe 8 commands to get up and running. So let me just pause here, and you can see we're already at block 2,000. If I go to Polkadot, there's a Polkascan Explorer, Polkadot. We'll see the current block height. There we go. That's 10 million, right? The current block height is 10 million. Okay, so
time in Polkadot?
oh, good question. I've forgotten actually. I know Ethereum is about 15 seconds, but I think it's
It must be probably faster if they got to this number of blocks in much shorter lifespan.
yeah. Let me see if I can Google it.
And then did I see correctly that the parachains or chains IDs are hex numbers
Whereabouts?
rather than? I think in one line of the code in when it was referring to chain ID, it was referring to it with 0x something, which is like the hex number per default. So
Yeah.
because in other networks sometimes it's an actual integer, so I wonder like what's this is considering chains as if they are like app chains or contracts or something like this. That's interesting. I mean, that's probably a Polkadot design question more than SubQuery, but that's just interesting to see.
It is, and here you can see it's saying that both Kusama and Polkadot are operating 1 block every 6 seconds. So yeah, you're right, it's much faster.
Yeah.
Always good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just stop this example here. But hopefully this gives everyone a very quick overview of how you can get a sample project up and running in 5 minutes. Obviously indexing is an issue, but you can start, as Daniel mentioned, at an earlier block time, and then index the data. Typically you put on a server somewhere, and then get your front end application to call an endpoint to grab whatever information you need as part of your mobile application. So yeah, so what we saw was the subquery hello world here. We looked at the handle block function in our mappings file. In fact, what I did is I actually didn't make any modifications to the sample project starter file. But if you wanted to, what you do is you would customize the handle block, you define the handler, you update the schema file, and then you would run the various commands to build it, to run it, and then to query it as well. Okay, just a few more slides to round off the workshop here. SubQuery Projects, this is the hosted version. So say you've made a project, well, where are you going to host it? Well, you can go to Amazon, create an account and pay for that and have it hosted there, or you can host it on SubQuery Projects, which provides production grade infrastructure and it's free to host. So you deploy it there and you can start querying it, powering your front-end mobile app. So that's what SubQuery Projects is. And you can access this on the website here under the word project, the keyword. And this just goes into how you could do that, but I'll skip over this for now. So let me just jump into the summary. You've heard me mention a few times the 3 key aspects: index, transform, and query substrate data, right, from the Polkadot blockchain. I did say it was similar to the Google of blockchain, allowing you to access data really quickly with filters, for example, and also the power of the 3, the manifest file, the schema file, and mappings file, otherwise known as the configuration file, the variables file, and the transformation file. You saw a very quick demo, and then I talked briefly about how you could host the project or your project on SubQuery Project. It's just unfortunate that the word project is part of the name, and then you can run or use it to power your front-end application. So with that, feel free to find out more. I'm sure there's lots of information around. Google is always magic. But other than that, that was pretty much just a whirlwind quick summary of what SubQuery does.
Cool.
I'll go to the floor for any questions.
Yes, I have a question. So when you're filtering your data, you can filter with such things like events, calls, and stuff like that, right? So are you able to actually filter a particular event and also a particular call? Because you can have a block, for example, where you can have multiple blocks for the same event, right? But then within that block, you can have a difference in the calls.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so what you'll do is for the event, you would just you bring up all the events in that particular block. So you'd filter out, for example, balance deposits, but it'll be all the deposits in that block.
Yeah.
And then what you do next is in your code, essentially, is you would loop through, you would do all sorts of logic here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you grab the event, then you loop through that data in order to pull out what you want. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep.
Right.
So I have a question that is maybe more like a history and progress for SubQuery the project. From all of what Siri is jumping. From all of what we've seen today, this is the current state of SubQuery and what currently applications on Substrate are using. for their own specific utility. That's my assumption, right? And my question is basically how much of this has been already developed and is only in optimization at this stage when the teams are adopting it, and also who are the example for really projects that you'd say have made significant use of SubQuery in Substrate?
So I think the first part of your question was at what stage or what status is SubQuery? Was that right?
Yeah, what we've seen today, was this something that was recently finalized in terms of development, or this is something that has been already from the get-go and has been mostly going through optimization?
Yeah.
That's
the Hello World project. Yeah, the Hello World project has been around for maybe close to a year now. So what you've seen here is very stable, and it's been optimized, and in fact we're rolling out new features such as historical queries, which is actually interesting because how do you find out how many dots you had when the block number was 1,000, right? Because when you increase your balance at block 2,000, the data in the database is actually overwritten. So we're actually developing a new feature. Well, it's actually out. I think we're going to release it in the next week or so, where we keep the historical state of your balance or of events, of data. So we actually know that, hey, Daniel actually had a balance of 10 when it was block 1,000, so the data is not overwritten. Things like that. So new features are coming out all the time.
That sounds like storage.
Yeah. But the solution was actually really neat, how we store the block range of the actual balance that you had before it changed.
The saving, the saving of the state, is that dependent on whether or not you actually queried it before the state changed, or is it the case that you do saving of state universally all the time? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, universally.
Oh wow.
I think there might be a flag. I'll have to double check with the devs, but I think there might be a flag.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And if we look at the projects, the second part of your question is, I've got to log in, so let me log in here. Explore. So you can see the current projects inside our Explorer that are running these projects, and we're hosting it for them. And for example, Nova Wallet, Moonbeam, etc., a whole bunch here. And if I go into one of them, like this one here, you can see that this is the actual API that you can go and hit and send a query, right? And you can actually go ahead and test it out by, this query here, hit run, and you don't have to customize it first of all to know the information you want, but you can actually go and get data from this real endpoint. So people are using it.
Nova Wallet. Cool.
And maybe a whole bunch of others as well. Parallel Finance, Asta with Fearless Wallet. And there's a whole bunch of community projects as well that other people have uploaded. You can go ahead and it's all open source, so you can use it, you can go ahead and fork it, you can do what you want. In order to drive your goal of making your application successful. Awesome. Well, there are any further questions, do let me know, but it's been a pleasure sharing with you how SubQuery works. Hopefully it was useful, hopefully not too boring. The hour's gone by pretty quick.
I have one more question.
Of course.
You mentioned in the beginning that currently what we're using as SubQuery, the solution is hosted, and
Yes.
assuming that it hints already that we're going to migrate to decentralized rather than hosted,
Exactly.
then does that mean that the software, like the protocol itself, instead of being on a hosted server, will have to run on a decentralized cloud or something? Or does that mean that there's going to have to be a network of itself that is dedicated specifically to run the protocol?
Yeah, very good question. So the dev team have been hard at work creating what's required to set up a network. Now this network, we've got participants who can become indexers, so they grab the data and make it available and effectively sell it, right? They sell the API data. And then we've got consumers or developers from the front end who need the data, so they'll pay for it to power their mobile application. And the indexes are what make up the decentralized network, and the consumers, they're the purchasers, and then we've got another persona called a delegator. These people can delegate their SubQuery tokens to an indexer and receive a share of the rewards, because the indexers are doing the work, like a manufacturer, a supplier, and the consumers are the consumers who are using the service to produce real-world applications.
Cool. So yeah, it will have its own crypto economy basically here. It's not like something that will be residing somewhere else, hosted somewhere else, even if it's decentralized cloud. It's like it has to have its own economy. Interesting.
Exactly. So we're recruiting at the moment. We've going through the testing phases. We've got a whole bunch of indexers helping us to build the network, test it, stress test, performance test before we go live to mainnet.
And I guess this is already like a token question, but I'm assuming that you would know, and it's interesting to also like tie eventually how does the like economy function in markets sense. Does that mean that eventually there will be an incentive to actually become one of those indexers or one of those other stakeholders that are, so collators?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got an incentivized system here to reward the indexers, because they're using their real money to host or to rent or buy infrastructure, right? So they need servers with Postgres databases, etc. So they're incentivized and rewarded for their work, and that is paid from consumers, because they need the data to power their apps, and hopefully their apps will be able to, as you may know, with I think you're involved with an Alice wallet, right? You're trying to grow users in the platform, so trying to build that network as well.
Yeah, or Talisman or Cordova, basically like projects that are using SubQuery can be motivated to actually be network participant.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this project is that it's actually really producing value, as opposed to inventing tokens and giving 20% return. But how do you sustain giving everyone 20% interest? I don't know. Print more tokens.
Yeah, very interesting. Cool.
Awesome.
I would also just would like to reiterate that this will be recorded, and also the link to the Hello World tutorial / work through that Sean did will be given in the description of that recording. So if you feel like went too fast, be on there, and also links. And I just went through quickly the academy in the university. You have so much more that's comprehensive, that goes through all the other details of SubQuery as well. So, it's just a starter, So I think when you go through and click through the link, also feel free to go through the rest of that section of the website, because it's truly comprehensive. Like, whatever you need is there.
Indeed.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Sean.
Pleasure and nice meeting everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, catch you guys later.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.